right. Welcome back to 2030, Life at 2030. We're so excited to have you back. Thanks for coming back, Dad, and being willing to share more of your life with us. We drive you crazy, especially yesterday driving for 3 hours each direction to watch your grandson.
I wished it was only 3 hours. With pit stops, it lasts like 4.5 hours.
We had fun. We got to see a big old Trump rally and all sorts of stuff
Yep,
yesterday.
I loved the Trump rally. That was fun.
All the teenagers on four-wheelers with the Trump flag around them. That was great. So, I want to talk about bus funnies for the first couple minutes of the next however many podcasts because we have so many little things to talk about. Actually, there was a request that I didn't mention to you. This guy really, really wants to hear about the John Wayne story.
Okay. When the LDS Church was in the process of closing Main Street between North Temple and South Temple, there was preliminary construction going on, and there was a bus stop out in front of the Relief Society building on Main Street between South Temple and North Temple, and they had dug some trenches and dug the road down a little bit, and there were some barriers up. And occasionally, I would pick up this tiny lady. I don't know the proper term, midget, but she was an older lady, probably in her late 50s, early 60s. She was probably maximum 3 feet tall. And I would pick her up periodically there. I think she lived up between there and the state capitol. And one day there was all these barriers up, and I just pulled up to the bus stop, and I didn't see anybody there. But I had about 30 seconds before it was time to leave. So I pulled over and I opened the door and I looked down, and there was a head between a couple of barriers, and there was a trench there about 2 feet deep. And here was this little lady standing in the trench, and all I could see was a head. And she looked at me and she says, "Well, you gonna help me up? Who the hell you think I am, John Wayne?" And it took me by surprise. So I walked down the steps and I picked her up onto the first step, and then she got up the next steps and sat in the seat, and she's like, "I wish they would fix this road." And that was about the extent of our conversation. But
That poor lady.
I felt sorry for her. I'm surprised she didn't stand up on the road instead of down in the hole. But that's where she was.
Did she slam her bag up there too on the step?
Yeah, well, I helped her up with all she had, so.
That's funny. You have a few other oddball passengers that she wasn't oddball, not her, but you had some that were definitely oddball.
Yeah, I used to have the last trip from the airport to downtown. And so I used to get some odd passengers coming from the airport to downtown. And there was a campground that had a golf course by it. And so a lot of people who were uptown would go golfing on the miniature golf course down on North Temple. And then they would wait at the stop across the street from the KOA campground to go back to town. So a lot of them would like to golf at night out there. So it was a par 3, and I think it was a putt-putt course too. So I used to pick up anywhere from 7 to 12 Hare Krishnas at the temple.
Wait, who were they?
At the airport. Hare Krishnas were a religious group that went out there and sold flowers out at the airport. And so my last trip in, they would all get on my bus. So I stopped and picked them up. And then as I was coming in, about 19th West, I picked up a guy who I picked up once in a while. He had a long robe on, and the robe said, "I am Jesus Christ," and he had long hair. So he used to get on and we would talk for a minute. And then I got to Redwood Road, and there was the devil.
Really?
His name was Steve, and he was a Vietnam War veteran who was really affected by Agent Orange. So he would dress up in a red devil outfit, and he cut his hair so there were two horns. And he tattooed under his eyes worm. And so he was a fun guy to talk to, but he got on my bus and I said hi, and he made up a lot of songs about UTA.
Oh man,
And
I would
so
love to hear those.
once
Dad.
in a while he would sing songs, and so he got on and went and sat down. Then I got to KOA campground and I picked up like 9 or 10 people that had been golfing going into town. So I turned the corner onto Temple Square and I let the devil and Jesus off. And I went to the next stop and I let the tourists off who were staying at the motel. And one of the tourists, as they got off the bus, said, "Oh, I saw my first Mormon." And so I wasn't exactly sure which one of these folks that they had determined was a Mormon. But because of rules at UTA, I couldn't, unless someone asked me a question, I couldn't talk politics or religion. So no one asked me which one was the Mormon, and so I couldn't tell them. But it's always interesting, the people you pick up on the bus.
Oh, seriously, I love that. Were there any other passengers that you can think of that you wanted to talk about?
No, just Steve. He was one day he was dressed up in a Lawrence of Arabia outfit up at University Hospital. Beautiful blue turban and beautiful blue robes, and he got on my bus and he was all upset. And I said, "Steve, what's going on?" And he said, "I came up here to donate my body to science, and they told me I had to be dead first." And he's like, what's the use of the nurses checking me out if I'm dead?" And I kind of laughed, and so he sang me one of UTA's songs that he had made up. And so it was always fun to see Steve, but the last time I saw Steve, he was sitting on the Brigham Young statue in the Indian's lap, and I heard that he was passing out marijuana joints. He was in his underwear.
Oh no.
And they took him to prison. And while in prison, he wrote a threatening letter to the President of the United States. And then the last I heard, Steve was released to a care facility and died there of cancer.
Oh man. And was he the one that you said had the orange poisoning? Was that the
Agent Orange,
Agent-
which was a defoliant from the Vietnam War.
Oh, that's so sad.
But he was a character, and I loved him, and we were good friends. But sometimes he just was off.
Yeah, I can see that. But with it almost being Halloween, it almost felt like Halloween for you.
Yeah,
all
it was
the time,
Halloween all
right?
the time on the bus for me. It was great.
No wonder you wanted to keep driving. You just never. It was a different day every day.
Yeah, I
right,
never
for you?
wanted to stop. It was fun.
Well, today we're actually going to talk about your mission. And I'm really excited to talk about this and all of your fun mission stories and interesting people that you came across as well. And so, what's the purpose of even going on a mission? Like your mission, what was the purpose of that one?
Well, the church teaches us that if you know something that's beneficial to others, if you know something that can help their life, you should go and share it with them. And so I knew something about my Savior, Jesus Christ, and what he had done for me. And I knew that I could help someone in their life by sharing that knowledge and how they can become better people if they want to, and how to get a relationship with the Father that sent them here. And
I love that. And how old were you when you were preparing to go on your mission?
from the time I was in scouting, my mother was the preparer.
Yep.
My mother every day said, "Are you getting ready for your mission?"
And what did you do to get ready for your mission?
I saved up money. I learned more about the gospel, attended seminary.
So the day came that you got this big envelope.
Right. Well, back then made an application, and I had done terrible with Spanish in school. So on the application it says, "Do you have any preferences?" And in large bold letters I write, "Not Spanish speaking." 3 times I wrote it on that line. And I underlined it and I circled it. And so when I got my call, I opened it up and it said, this was in 1971, that you're called to serve for a term of 2 years in the Ecuador mission.
And what do they speak in Ecuador, Dad?
And I turned to my father and I said, "What do they speak in Ecuador?" And he said, "Spanish."
Wait, maybe you should have written it 4 times. Maybe 4. So how did you handle that?
But there was someone who knew more than I did.
Exactly. I agree. So I want to know more about Ecuador. You have told me your whole life stories that you have experienced there, but I've never asked you specific questions like, did you ever serve beachside or seaside? Because isn't there a big area?
Yeah, I served in Guayaquil, which is a beach town.
And how was that?
It's muggy and hot, and it's a pretty unruly town. I mean, if you hear about towns of pirates, Guayaquil was one of those towns. It was poor. It had a river that ran one direction in the morning and one direction in the afternoon, which was a tide. And there was an island that I used to go visit, but you had to take the ferry to the other side of the river. And so a lot of kids who were shoeshine kids lived on the other side of the river. So I tried to go there later on in the afternoon while the kids were trying to get home. If they had someone who wanted their shoe shined on the ferry, they didn't have to pay the fare. They could do the shoe shine across the ferry. So every time I went in the afternoon, I would have 2 shoe shine kids sign my shoes, 1 on each shoe, so that I could help get 2 kids across for free. And the shoe shine was only 1 sucre, which was 4 cents. So it cost me 8 cents to get my shoe shine and get 2 kids across the river for free. And these shoe shine kids were poor. And I talked to them, and a lot of them said, "I can't go home unless I make a certain amount of money, or my dad won't let me in the house." And maybe they were the only breadwinners. And
Yeah, and you were telling me a little bit about how you saw that they're...
yeah, if they're shoe shine kits, if they were out of like black shoe shine polish, or they had little cans of it, I'd just go in the shoe shine place and I'd re-outfit their kit. A black and a brown and a couple of new brushes only cost me $1. So,
Which would have been how many shoe shines for them to do? You know?
oh, a lot,
A lot.
hundreds probably.
Oh, so what do you think that meant to these kids?
I don't know, but I know what it meant to me. I always loved talking to kids.
And if you were representing God in a way as a missionary...
God, the first thing he ever did, I mean, Christ, every time he came to earth, first thing he wanted to do was bless the children.
Absolutely.
So, and that's because children are so precious. And
They are. And I'm sure when you first arrived to Ecuador and you saw the condition, you know, just so many poor people, how did you feel?
well, it's overwhelming to begin with. You don't understand what poverty means until you see a family trying to survive on basically $200 American dollars a year.
That would be kind of hard to do, especially here, right? How did they do it? How did they make it?
I don't know. One of my favorite guys, all he did, he had a little tiny shoe shop, or a little tiny sock shop. And he was a member, and once a month he'd go to Quito to buy more socks. And so I'd go in 2-3 times a week and buy a couple of pair of socks, and they were pretty cheap. And then he would ask us missionaries to watch the shop for half a day while he ran to Quito and back. And so we would man the shop with one of his kids, and we we would just put all the socks back that we bought.
Oh.
And he always wondered how his shop got more full of socks while we were tending it. But he never said. He was just grateful. And it's kind of fun to find little ways to help, just any way you can. So many people living over the sewers or over the garbages and go through garbage all day long to find something to survive on, sell metal, whatever.
Yeah. No, that's hard. Hey, I want to hear about the animals there and the insects and everything that you had. 'Cause you had never seen or even dealt with any of these things before because you come from a dry climate in Utah. And how was that for you?
Well, some things were familiar. I mean, when we lived in Rio Bamba, we had a pet mouse who would climb the leg of the table and eat breakfast with us. And I woke up one morning in Guayaquil and there was a baby iguana on my chest looking at me. He was about 6-7 inches long.
Oh.
And so when I moved, he took off running on his back legs, but there were iguanas everywhere, hanging from the trees and in the parks. And there was a little city called Cuenca, which was built on historically, it was a breeding ground for tarantulas.
Oh.
So twice a year, millions of tarantulas would invade Cuenca.
Millions?
Millions.
Oh.
And
how small? How big were they? They weren't small, right?
no, I would imagine 5-6 inches in diameter from, one leg to the other. And sometimes when they had outdoor showers there, which was a little enclosed area. The shower head was just a little electrical thing that heated up the water as it came through the shower head. But you used to have to pluck 5 or 6 tarantulas out of the bottom of the shower so you could stand in there to take a shower.
Oh.
But you really, I mean, when you live near the Amazon and we used to take bus rides and monkeys would jump on top of the buses and try to open up the suitcases. And so there was usually 2 or 3 guys sitting on the top to get the monkeys away from or if you stopped at a city
Did you throw bananas at them?
to buy something to eat on the bus, because some of the bus rides were 16 hours long.
Yeah, and I remember you telling me on the bus ride that like pigs and chickens would run freely all over the bus.
People would get on the bus with a small pig or chickens, or even on the airplanes. I mean, I got on an airplane once and a guy was standing in the aisle with a pig. And they used to overflow the airplanes. 4 or 5 people would be standing in the aisle.
That's crazy. Yeah, we're going to talk about those airplanes really soon.
And we had a bus ride. We were going from Rio Bamba to Quito. And the bus stopped, and the guy stood up and said, "We need some help to get a snake off the road."
What?
So 8 or 10 guys got off, and there was a snake about 20 to 25 feet long. Literally about 12 inches in diameter. That was just sunning itself on the road. And if the bus driver would have hit it, he would have broke an axle or something.
Oh, yeah. There's no way you guys... Oh.
So these guys got off and drug it off the road, and the snake was mad.
Oh, my goodness. Dad, were you thinking, where am I? What is happening here?
Well, I kind of figured when I was going to the equator that I would see a lot of animals that I wasn't used to, and snakes were pretty prevalent, big bugs.
So how long did it take you to acclimate to the humidity and the bugs? And
2 years. I had diarrhea twice, and both time it lasted a year. I mean, it's just when you change your diet and when things aren't as clean as you're used to, you're buying things off carts on the side of the road that aren't regulated by anybody.
Right.
You're just used to... And the mission president's wife gave us a list of things not to eat or not to drink. And on the bottom of the list, it said, it's not good manners to refuse something offered.
Oh.
So I cut that little strip off and threw the rest away. And I just accepted what was offered, hoping that God would make my stomach strong.
Okay, well, since we're talking about that, tell us some stuff that you were offered.
Well, I was out helping Elder Tobongo plow with 2 oxen and a wooden plow. The plow was probably 10 feet long with a metal edge on the end, and he held an arm that came up and plowed along, and I got to be pretty good at it. But his wife would walk behind us and pick up these big white grubs. They were about the size of a thumb, maybe half a size longer than a thumb. She'd pick up a whole bunch of these, and then they would offer lunch to us. And what I thought was fried mashed potatoes, because they were really good, ended up being these grubs fried up and put in soup.
Did you wish
they
you
were
didn't
really
know?
Crispy on the outside and gooey on the inside?
Oh.
And, I just assumed they were potatoes.
Just tell your mind that.
Right.
And then
Until I said, those were the best potatoes I've ever had. And she said, oh, no, those were the grubs that we were picking up.
then you're like, you mean potatoes, right?
So I learned never to ask what they were offering, because I really didn't want to know.
Yeah.
Because in their heart, they were offering the best they had.
Oh, of course they were. And they loved you so much.
Even though they were trying to kill you. Not intentionally, but, it just, that was their life. And
yeah, I remember you telling me that you ate this bowl of soup that was really delicious until you stirred it.
When I stirred it, it was full of ants in the bottom, and that was the protein. But
how
it was
did
pretty.
You do that?
It was pretty
lived
good
Fear
soup.
Factor before it was even a thing, right?
Well, you're not thinking about that. You're there to love the people, and if you come home in one piece, I mean, when I came home, I was filled with grubs, and we had to go to BYU, and they gave us a bunch of pills and stuff to take for whatever we had, and I got really sick, and I threw up about a 90-foot tapeworm.
Whoa.
Which I probably should have kept in there. It would have kept my weight in check.
No. I remember you saying
But
that.
when I got home, I was really skinny, and I could eat a lot, and I couldn't gain any weight. It was...
And that's why the worms,
Right.
right?
And the doctor told me that I probably had a tapeworm, and he said, it's going to come out one end or the other, and I threw up, and about 6 feet of it came out, so I just pulled the rest of it out.
Oh, goodness. Oh. Dad, you went through a lot. I remember you telling
Yeah, but
your
you
mom.
don't think you're going through a lot,
It's true, but it's funny when you say, when you cook my steak, throw it on the floor first, please.
When I got home, I told my mom, if you cook me a hamburger, throw it on the floor to get a little dirt on it so I can... But people I didn't get invited to people's homes very often. That just wasn't the way it was.
Right, and that's okay.
Plus, we didn't have a lot of members, so there wasn't a lot of people to invite you over.
Did they look at you as strange because you were American? How was that?
Yeah. Americans were not very popular over there.
And how was the government there too? Was that...
When I was there, the government was overthrown 3 times by different military leaders.
Wow.
When I first got there, within the first 3 months, martial law was enacted because the army had taken over and killed the president, and they had taken over, and so tanks were rumbling up and down the streets. We were not allowed out on the streets between 10 at night and 6 in the morning.
Wow. So your letters home you could say very little. You're like, dear mom and dad, today was a good day. Goodbye.
I mean, there was no sense in worrying them.
Right.
And the mission president says, let them hear what they hear.
So how overwhelming was Ecuador for you, especially with all that going on?
Well, it was scary, but I don't know. A missionary has different feelings than anybody else. You're set apart as someone to teach.
Yeah.
It's the only time in your life you'll ever be set apart to be a missionary. And so, literally a disciple. And so, you do what you have to.
That's true. And then when there are things that are happening that are that intense, that actually leads people closer to God. So people could have been looking for you as a missionary to be taught. So I'm curious. Let's see. Oh, how actually did you do with Spanish when you were?
In the MTC, I did lousy, but I was learning it. And when I stepped off the plane and started, my first instinct was to just start talking to the kids. So every chance I had to talk to shoeshine kids or any kids along the way, I learned from them. And 5 months into my mission, we were teaching a discussion. And the lady who we were teaching says, "Are you from here?" And I said, "No." She said, "Your Spanish is perfect."
Wow.
And it was then that I realized that it wasn't me. It wasn't me that was speaking the Spanish. I had been given a gift to speak it. And the minute I got home, I couldn't speak it worth beans. I couldn't speak English either.
You seem to understand Spanish, though, really well.
Yeah, well, my wife's learning Duolingo Spanish, and it's really annoying, but I get a real laugh in the car when she says a sentence that just cracks me up. And
so she's still going at it. I love it.
Yeah, and it's helping me to regain it. I really didn't have any need, I didn't think, to keep it up, but I have found that it's helpful.
Especially on the bus when people would come off speaking Spanish and you would reply in Spanish.
Right. That was fun. That was always fun. When they would swear at me in Spanish and I would just tell them to have a good day.
That's funny. So, hey, I'm curious. There were different dialects in every village that you went to. And so was that really hard to learn?
Well, a lot of villages spoke really fast. Like down on the coast, everyone left off the S's. So the word more or less in Spanish is más o menos, but on the coast it was más o menos. So you really had to concentrate because they left off the S's on everything and they spoke really fast. And there was the Ottavalanian Indians spoke Quechua, which was the non-written dialect.
Wow.
And that's where I spent the last 9 months of my mission. And so we really had to rely on interpreters because it was not a written language at the time. And
I actually want to hear so much more about Otavalo and your experiences there with the farmers. That was with the farmers, right?
yeah,
If you want to talk about that, go right ahead.
well, Otavalo was a really interesting place. We had to walk almost 5 miles to meet the Indians in their villages, which were up in the hills. So most of the Ottavalanians had to walk quite a ways. There was a bus that went out part way, but most of the time they just came in for the market to sell their shawls and their ponchos and their hats and their belts. And they were great weavers and farmers. And Brother Tabongo, we used to, when we first started teaching, we weren't getting any response. And so I talked to Brother Tabongo, and he says, "Well, the leaders of the predominant church here say that you Americans are here to steal our land."
Oh, wow.
And so we fasted and prayed to find out how to let them know that we were just there to help. And we were told that we got permission from the president when we called him that we could leave our apartment at 3 o'clock in the morning, walk to their village, and then help them work. We built mud homes, we thatched roofs, we stacked corn stalks so that the water would run off, and basically cow feed. We plowed, we did anything they wanted to help them all morning long, and then in the afternoon we traipsed the hills and taught them the gospel.
Did you notice them starting to kind
Yeah,
of...
it didn't take very long before they all invited us in. When they realized that we weren't there to take their lands. We didn't want their lands.
You were just there. You loved them. You just wanted to help. And
Yeah, and it was cool to help each one of them. I mean, it's the first time I'd ever stomped mud and straw together to make bricks, and we stomped them into brick size molds and built walls, and
that would hurt if you did that barefoot, right?
we did. But it was it was cool. I mean, you didn't really think about that stuff. You're just out there working, and as a missionary, labor is moving people or painting, or even if it's ugly yellow paint, or whatever you do, you're working the Lord's way. And he wasn't afraid to go fish. He wasn't afraid to show him where to fish, to help him fish.
That's true. And did you ever notice the people coming around towards the gospel in any way from your
Yeah,
teaching?
we taught a lot. When we first got there, there were 2 families that were members of the church, and now they have a stake there.
And not too long ago, how excited were you to hear the announcement of the Quito, Ecuador temple?
Well, there was the temple there quite a while ago.
Oh, there was? Wait, then... Okay, never mind.
I'm not sure how many temples are there now, but
There was one Ecuador temple announcement like
it
5
could have
years
been
ago. We were so
Guayaquil,
excited.
or I'm not sure. I don't remember. I should have researched this, but all you out there can research and find out how many temples are in Ecuador.
Yeah, write in the comments, please.
But when I went on a mission in 1971, it was one mission, and there were 50 missionaries. And now I suspect there's at least 6 missions, maybe 7.
And Elder Tabongo is still going strong.
He became stake president, and then he was the first Otavalanian patriarch. And I don't know if he's still alive or not, but I mean, he has a great story. I was working in the fields one day, and I knew that his wife was pregnant, and she literally walked over to a tree and gave birth to that child, cleaned the baby off, put it on her back, and came back to the field and started working.
Wow.
And I was amazed. And so I went and talked to her a couple of days later. And I said, "How many children do you have?" And she says, "Well, I've given birth to 15, but 3 are alive."
Oh, wow.
So, but it was matter of fact to her. The thought of going to a doctor or anything else wasn't.
Yeah, that's... I mean, were there really many medical facilities there?
There was a little doctor's office nearby. But you got to remember that the Otavalanian Indians were not even second-class citizens. They were like a non-entity as far as...
Yeah, if their language wasn't written down.
Right,
as
but
well.
they weren't respected by the Spanish people there.
So that must have been a real eye-opener for them when missionaries came and loved them and worked with them. That was such a cool example.
Yeah,
guys set.
I mean, we used to get flack for it, but the Indians, the Otavalanians were mad. Some of them were mad at us too. I mean, we were walking down the street and several drunk Otavalanian Indians came and stole my scriptures and my diary, and they burned them in the middle of the street. And, Satan was prevalent.
Very much.
Alcohol destroyed these people. And that made me the saddest. Sometimes Sunday morning along the street, the side streets, there would be 10 or 12 Otavalanian Indian women sitting on the side of the road waiting for their drunk husband to wake up and so they could walk home.
Oh, that must have been so hard to see as a missionary.
Yeah,
you have
because
this
they're all
message.
God's children. I don't care who you are.
Yeah, you're loved.
If
by
you're
him,
here on this earth, you're a child of God,
and he loves you so much.
and that's just basically the way it is. And we as a society need to understand that.
So I know that you have, I'm going to ask you really quick. You probably have more than one, but just tell me one of your scary experiences there. Maybe the airplane.
Any
you
bus
choose.
ride, any airplane ride, any.
Explain the airplanes to us. Because I said so before that we were going to talk about it.
Airplanes were not regulated in Ecuador when I went there. And I don't know how many countries don't have regulations with flight. But people standing in the aisle obviously is not a regulation.
In an airplane.
And so the very first flight I had to take was on a Air Equatoriana, which was a four propeller engines, and every one of these engines that started up blew black smoke and flames out the back. And the inside engine on the left side of the plane would not start. It would just crank over and blow little smoke out. So this little short guy, maybe 4 feet tall, pushed this long ladder out and got up there with a big wrench, and he was hammering on the side of the engine. All of a sudden, the engine cranked over, black smoke and big flames shot out the back. And the little guy gave a thumbs up to the pilot, and he crawled down the stairs, and off we went, and we took off. And
That wasn't even the scariest part, right?
And I'm like, I guess this is as good a place as any to die. But it was a 1 hour airplane ride or a 17-hour bus ride. So,
Oh wait, tell me how the airplanes took off. Remember that?
well, that was the little city of Cuenca had a plateau of an airport. It's been redesigned just a few years later, but at the end of the runway, there was like a 2,500-foot cliff. And airplanes could land on it pretty easily, but to take off, they had to go to the end of the runway and then drop into the big crevice to build up speed to continue flying. And I didn't know that. And the first time I had to take a flight to Quito, I noticed that there were 3 or 4 members on the flight with me and my companion. And I said, "Oh, you guys are flying today?" And they say, "We only fly when missionaries are on the plane. We don't fly if there aren't missionaries on the plane."
That's within reason too, though.
Right. They figured God would protect the plane if we were on there.
Was that the best amusement ride ever for you?
It was.
I can't imagine just dropping.
I didn't
into
know
this
the
cliff.
plane was going to drop down into that. And when we got to the end of the runway and I noticed that we weren't off the ground yet. It was kind of scary. I mean, we only dropped a few hundred feet before we gained enough speed to...
Okay, that's better. I'm thinking you dropped like 1,000 feet. Going.
Well, it felt like it, but...
You don't want that to happen.
And, it's just kind of weird to get on an airplane with a woman sitting next to you with a chicken or...
They brought the animals everywhere.
Yeah. Animals were life.
Yeah.
I
Absolutely.
mean, if you've ever seen the movie Johnny Lingo, he bought his wife for 8 cows. And so back then, commodity was animals. That was what you had.
Well, when we go visit, we bring a salad. So when they go visit, they bring a chicken.
Yeah.
Here you go.
Or whatever they've grown, I mean, it was, for them, it was a treat to give you what they had if you, like, I guess the scariest thing that ever happened was the Tabongos lived upstairs in their house, and the bottom part was reserved for the kitchen, and livestock lived down there, and they had a small place to sit. And in the kitchen, they had 10, 12, 15 guinea pigs always running around. There was a really cute brown and white guinea pig, and I told Sister Bongo, "I like the looks. I like that guinea pig." She said, "You like that one?" I said, "Yeah." So she picked it up, and she cut its head off and stripped the skin off and cooked it for us.
Oh, wow.
So I realized that I didn't like guinea pigs anymore.
Or don't say which ones
I
are
don't
cute.
say that. And that's just the way they were. They were willing to give you what they had.
She loved you so much that she gave her best to you. I love that. Was there anything funny that happened in Ecuador?
There's always something funny if you look for it. I'm trying to think of what was funny.
Because you always were, you have learned
Well,
to look
I guess
for it.
one of the funniest things, but it was kind of scary, the buses there didn't necessarily come to a complete stop. So sometimes if you wanted to get off, especially the buses in Guayaquil, they didn't have windows in them, and they had a front and rear door with a handle on each one. And sometimes the bus would slow down because each driver was their own owner of their bus. So sometimes if there were big stops, 2 and 3 buses were racing to that stop to get there first to pick up more people. And if a bus saw another bus and you wanted to get off, they might just barely slow down enough for you to jump off.
Oh my gosh.
And so I jumped off, and I had a brand new companion just in from New York City. And he had the slickest shoes I ever saw. And so he jumped off, and he hit the road, and it was wet. And the roads there are always kind of moist and slick. And he started sliding towards this big window on this building. And if he wouldn't have hit this little dip in the cobblestone and knocked him on his face, he would have gone through the window.
Oh.
So the first thing we did was I took his brand new shoes to my favorite shoe guy, and he sewed old tire tread onto the bottom of his shoes. So when we need shoes resoled, we'd go out behind this guy and pick what tread pattern we wanted. Sometimes we wanted the sidewall that said Firestone or...
Oh, that's so funny.
But I loved the tread pattern, and he would cut them out and sew them onto the bottom of your shoe. So you had a 40,000 mile guarantee shoe.
Which you probably felt like you walked that many miles, right?
Right, but it was, you never had to fix the shoes again. And that was a blessing in itself.
Tell me some of the strangest things you ever had happen to you.
Strangest things. What have you got written down? I can't.
I have the headhunters.
Oh, yeah. We had a member in Guayaquil that said he had a bunch of people that came out of the Amazon every once in a while. And he heard they were coming out. And he said they're not very friendly people. And so we went to the edge of the city where the Amazon jungle met, we had to go quite a ways out. And out of the jungle came about 30 people that their hair was matted down with red clay. And they had loincloths on, literally. That's all they wore. And hanging from the loincloths were shrunken heads. And he told me that these were people from the Amazon. And he introduced them to us and told them that we were representatives of the great white God. And we sat down and talked to them for a while, and they told us that their ancestors had said he would come back, and we told him that he is coming back. And so they offered us a shrunken head, but we couldn't accept gifts. And I didn't really want a shrunken head.
That would be so crazy. How did they react when you said you couldn't take it?
Oh, they were fine.
And did they speak a different dialect?
Yeah, it wasn't anything I understood, but he did. But I hadn't learned Quechua, so I don't know whether it was a similar language then.
Okay, so you had a translator.
But some of the souvenir shops in the valley sold shrunken heads that were made out of monkey heads and skin that was shrunk and made to look like a shrunken head.
Do you even know how they did that?
I don't want to know how they did it.
I know. It's just one of those questions in the back of your head.
But
like,
he
how?
used to go and trade with them deep in the Amazon. He wasn't a member of the church, but he wanted to know if I wanted to meet him, and we did want to meet him. And it was interesting. They they just came and did a little trading. They basically wanted knives and arrow points,
Oh,
things that they needed for their hunting.
but what did they hunt?
I don't know.
I
He
don't
told
wanna
me
know.
he told me that it was custom that different tribes would attack each other and steal their heads and shrink them as a trophy.
Oh, that's so interesting.
So I don't know. I don't know if it was true or not, but these guys were pretty spooky, and it was a fun time to talk to them.
Did you have a different feeling when you were around them, though?
Not really.
Just they were living their lives.
Right, and I don't see God judging them because if they don't know any different, at some point they will.
And besides the matted clay, did they have kind of a different look? Were they shorter?
They were dark. They weren't African American, but they very dark skinned.
compared to the rest in Ecuador?
They were short.
Kind of
Average
like
height
pygmies.
probably 4'7", 4'8".
Wow. So
They
it's
weren't
like
tall.
they just came out of history and came and talked with
Yeah,
you.
it was kind of cool. And
So interesting. I love that.
but back then in the early 70s, you know, Ecuador was a pretty new mission, and
Yeah. I can imagine that being really hard to just acclimate to everything. And I'm curious, did you have any frustrating experiences? I know we talked about the farmers and how they thought their
it
land
was
was
always
taken.
frustrating. I mean, you would knock on doors and little kids would answer the door all the time. And you would say, "Is your mother here?" And the kid would say no. And you would say, "Well, will you go ask her when she's going to be here?" And he'll say, "Okay, just a minute." And he'd come back and say, "She said she'll be here tomorrow." And so I understand the predominant religion. People have grown up that way. And I was okay with that. And I had a really cool family that we lived with. I called her the Poof-Foof. And we were required in our housing to rent a room from a non-member family and eat 2 meals a day with them. So we would pay for room and board for 2 meals. If we baptized the family, we had to find a new place to live. There couldn't be any single girls living in the household over the age of 12, I think it was, or 10. And so we called him Mama and Papa. And one day, Papa said, "I would like my 10 brothers and sisters, they would like to know about your church." And I said, "Cool." And he said, "They're coming to dinner tomorrow night. Would you come and talk to them?" And I said, "Sure." And Papa lived in a big house. He was a more or less, we would call it an upper middle class. And so when we got back to eat dinner, little did I know that all his brothers and sisters were either Catholic priests or nuns.
Oh, wow.
And so there were all these priests and nuns sitting around the table.
That wasn't intimidating.
And so we basically gave them a history of the church and the 13 Articles of Faith. And we discussed the beginning of the church and the Book of Mormon. And we discussed that the Book of Mormon was a heritage of their ancestors and where they came from. And we gave them each a copy of the Book of Mormon. And for about 3.5 hours, they asked us questions and we answered them. And it was a great discussion. And we became good friends with them. And we never really had any problem after that of people thinking we were there to steal their lands. I guess they realized that we were just there to teach about Jesus, and that was it.
Yeah, and when you know the true story,
And
then
we
that helps.
shared our testimony with them, and we showed them, why the book was important to them and why we were there to teach them their history.
That's pretty
And
neat. I
it was
love
pretty
that.
cool. It is intimidating to sit around with that many people who had committed their lives to a religion. And everyone should commit their life to their religion if they really believe in it.
Right. And then I think that was cool that they were willing to listen and
They
hear.
wanted to know. They really did. I mean, I think they knew that more missionaries would be coming in.
And so it was good for them to know the truth. Like, no, we're not coming in to
Right.
steal your
And
land.
Mama and Papa knew that we were easygoing guys and we weren't intimidating. We never pushed it on them.
Were they ever baptized?
I don't think so.
So you got to stay with them for
Yeah,
your time.
I transferred from their house and knew, more missionaries came.
That is awesome. Were all of your companions from USA? From the United
No,
States?
Elder Kusikonki was from Guatemala, and I served with him for 7 months. And he spoke no English, so that helped my Spanish study.
That was pretty cool. I'm curious, like, what was your takeaway in being in such a poor country? I know we talked about that a little bit before, but what was your takeaway when you ended up going home, and what did you learn from everybody?
When I got home, I was embarrassed by how much we had. My dad was embarrassed because of the way I dressed. I left everything I owned there for the people. I left everything. I brought nothing home that wasn't a souvenir except the clothes on my back. I even wore woven sandals home.
And you came home in November.
Right. And so it took my dad couldn't understand why I was uncomfortable to buy a new suit and some new clothes, and because for them it was a lifetime of just trying to get to a temple.
Yeah.
I mean, there were members there who sold everything they owned just to make it to a temple once. And so I was embarrassed that I was so well off. And before I left on my mission, I didn't feel poor or well off. But coming back and seeing such poverty,
How has that shaped you for the rest of your life since then?
I'm content with a small house as long as we raised our children. We wanted someone to be there when they got home. It's not about the size of the house you live in. It's about the feeling you get when you're there. And
I hope I don't embarrass you saying this. I know how big your heart is, and you share everything with everybody. It
well, but
actually
it's not
helps you.
mine. It's not mine. My food storage is not mine. It's to help my neighbors survive, and then we eat till it's gone and we starve together. It's not about how long I can live. It's about how long we can live.
I like that. You've just always been so kind, and I think that it's hard for you to say, okay, I have this much and I can't share. So it's almost in a way you're sharing with everyone in Ecuador that you couldn't, and you have your whole life. And you even did that, sharing your lunches on the bus with little kids. That little kids have your heart. I have to say that.
Yep.
There's no little kid that can be around you that is hungry that you will not do something
No,
about.
I'll feed them.
And I'm so grateful for your example for that. So, would you ever go back to Ecuador if you could?
I don't know. What I did there is fine, but there's people that come behind me that were better suited to deal with what was there at the time.
Yeah.
I have no need to go back there because there's a lot of people from there that are here.
Yeah. And if Elder Tabongo was still alive, which hopefully he is, that would be so cool.
I doubt if
to
he's
see him.
alive, but that doesn't matter. At
Can we
some
have a
point, him
picture?
and I'll have a talk.
Oh, yeah. I'm so excited for you guys to one day do that. To wrap this up, I have one last question for you. What advice would you give to your grandkids and to your friends to help them prepare to go on a mission if they decide to go?
Learn to cook. Learn to fix things. Because as a missionary, you're asked to do a lot of things you're not used to. Stay in shape. Prepare mentally. Too many missionaries right now are not prepared mentally to leave home. I believe that's why the church lets them email every week.
Yeah. There's a lot of big things that they deal
I mean, there
with.
were times I didn't get letters for months. The fact that they can email every week says a lot about the generations that are coming up. They're tough, but we live in a tough world.
We do.
I would tell them to get a job and learn how to work, and
learn Spanish in junior high, starting junior high, right?
not Spanish. Pick another language.
Or write it 4 times on their application.
I mean, just prepare yourself mentally and physically. You know, read the Book of Mormon actually once before you go.
Yeah. And be willing to
Get
do
a-
what the Lord asks you to do.
Yeah, get a relationship with your Heavenly Father.
How can you do that?
Talk to Him as you would your father. I had a young man come to me when I was bishop, and the Spirit said he has no idea how to pray. So I asked him how he prayed, and he says, I just pray. I said, look, what I want you to do is go to your Heavenly Father as you would want your son to come to you. Think about it. If your son was having trouble, how would you like him to approach you? And that's the way you need to go to your Heavenly Father. And that's how you gain a relationship.
That's perfect. I love that. You've taught me that my whole life, and I'm so grateful for your example. And thank you for going on your mission and for all that you...
Oh, I'm sure we'll talk about my mission in the future.
I would love to, because I feel like we've just talked about a little bit of it. There's
Yep.
so much. So I figure this is a good start. So thanks, guys, for joining us, and thanks, Dad, for coming.
Anytime.
Thanks, John, for doing all that you do. You guys, there's so many times I look over at John and he's trying so hard not to laugh at everything that he hears. I can't wait for the day that you can actually hear him laugh out loud, because we just caught him so off guard with something. So that's a challenge for you. All right, guys, can't wait to talk with you again, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.